Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us on Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. Our top story is the tenuous ceasefire between Iran, the United States, and Israel.
The fragile deal staved off a potential intensification of the conflict. But as Matt Bradley tells us from Tel Aviv, it already seems to be on life support.
Well, the big news last night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaching out to the government of Lebanon and offering negotiations, presumably towards some sort of more permanent diplomatic balance. Now, we've seen several countries throughout the region normalizing their diplomacy with the Israelis, and it is a big wish for the Israelis to normalize their diplomacy with the Lebanese. But all of this is going on as Hezbollah and Israel continue to exchange fire. People in Lebanon say that the attacks that the Israel launched against Hezbollah targets in Lebanon were some of the worst that they've seen in generations. Now, this is going to be a major bone of contention. The situation with Lebanon has become a major sticking point for the broader ceasefire between Israel and the United States on one side and Iran on the other. And Iran has said that they will not reopen the Strait of Hormuz, that critical waterway, until Israel stops striking Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, we're about to see negotiations taking place in Pakistan, starting presumably tomorrow. It's going to involve U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, his main diplomatic envoy. What happens next in the Strait of Hormuz and even in Lebanon could be determined in Pakistan. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
This week, we asked lawmakers what they thought of the situation in Iran, specifically when President Trump issued that dire threat earlier this week that the U.S. would bomb Iran, quote, into the Stone Ages, and that Iran's whole civilization would die if they didn't open the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. I talked with the Democratic Congressman Andre Carson. You talked with Republican Senator Todd Young. They're both back here while Congress is on spring break. Congressman Carson called the president's words disrespectful and reckless. Take a listen.
Another example of recklessness, inappropriate language. I think what has worked arguably well for him in the business world is not applicable to the global community. And I think it's showing. I think our international partners are deeply concerned. Our Five Eyes intelligence sharing partners are deeply concerned. And I think his kind of disrespectful language, the kind of posturing that he's doing, it doesn't work when diplomatic relations have worked so far. Under the Obama administration, we were able to bring the P5+1 partners to the table, even alongside of China and Russia. Those relationships have frayed and collapsed under President Trump, and I think, and I fear that they'll collapse even more under his very destructive and divisive language.
And Carson also said President Trump should be concerned about war crimes in regards to bombing power plants and bridges. He also didn't feel that the president has ever really made an appeal to Congress or the American people about why the United States attacked Iran in the first place.
But Senator Todd Young did not see it that way. I caught up with him in Carmel on Tuesday as the clock ticked toward that 8 p.m. deadline that inevitably got extended. Here's what he told me at the time.
I believe President Trump is trying to apply maximum leverage, and I hope the Iranians listen. I hope that we can bring this conflict to a close very quickly and that they reopen the Strait of Hormuz. We're dealing with a leading state sponsor of international terrorism, and I think the president is trying to elicit a positive response from them.
You see bombing bridges and power plants and civilian infrastructure as an okay strategy?
If they have a military use, that is what the Geneva Conventions say, that's what international law says. And so it's the job of those who assess this within the military and those close to the president to ascertain whether some of these assets are playing a military role. If so, then in a case of armed conflict like this, then they are regarded as legitimate targets.
How concerned are you, though, that this will drag on?
You know what? I have concerns. Hoosiers have concerns. The president has concerns, so I share those concerns.
Republicans are concerned about what this could mean for the midterms. The GOP holds a slim majority in the House.
And I talked with David McIntosh with the conservative group Club for Growth, whether they're concerned about that. They're spending millions on Republican campaigns across the country, including a lot of money right here on our state and our state races here in Indiana. That's coming up a little later here on Crossroads Politics. Looking forward to that conversation. Of course, Hoosier leaders outside of Congress are also having to deal with the impacts of the conflict. High gas prices are one of the most dreaded issues for political incumbents right now.
Governor Mike Braun took aim at them this week. On Wednesday, he announced a holiday on one of Indiana's gas taxes. This is Indiana's gas use tax, also known as the gas sales tax. This is a little odd. Indiana doesn't apply the normal 7% sales tax to gas because the price changes so often. We've seen that. Instead, it calculates the average of gas prices over the previous 2 months, applies 7% to that, and that's the tax on a gallon of gas. For example, for the month of April, that was set at 17 cents. So it changes with the price of gas as it goes up and down.
Did you get all that?
Yeah, right.
But that
no
isn't-
math on this exam.
Right. And that isn't even the majority of the gas tax, though, right? That's
Right.
actually a smaller part of what we pay in the overall gas tax.
It is, right. The state also charges a flat excise tax of 36 cents on every gallon of gas also.
So why just a holiday on the sales tax?
Because it's the only one that the governor can do anything about, declare a holiday on. State law allows him to declare a state of emergency and suspend the gas sales tax. Governor Braun explained suspending the larger excise tax would mean bringing back the General Assembly.
Anything lawmakers would need to do, of course, we'd have to come into session to do it, and I would welcome them to look at it. This is action I can take on my own, and I hope they're going to support it, because if not, they're misreading what we need to do. Anything more comprehensive or beyond the emergency portion of what I can do as governor, it would take that kind of action.
Okay, so the governor is doing what he can without calling a special session.
Right.
So what are you hearing from lawmakers about this?
Okay, so Republicans, they're all for it. Shortly before the governor's announcement, several Republican leaders in the state Senate put out a joint statement in support of a gas tax holiday.
So what about Democrats?
So they're also supportive of putting money back in Hoosiers' pockets right now. They say it's necessary. State Representative Greg Porter, a Democrat here in Marion County, said Hoosiers obviously need the relief.
This is what Hoosiers need right now, is to suspend the gas tax because of the gas being over $4 a gallon. The economic impact of it is yet to be seen, but we know there is some relief, and we're very supportive of that. It is about
And Porter also said that the money saved from the tax holiday needs to go directly to the consumers. And that's something Governor Braun said too, explaining that the Attorney General's office would be keeping an eye on gas stations to make sure the savings were getting to drivers and that there was no price gouging.
All right, so agreement there on both sides of the political aisle. No surprise, it's certainly advantageous as we head into an election in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
But it wasn't all bipartisan love. The chair of the state Democratic Party, Karen Talion, was not kind with her response, writing, quote, gas prices are up over $1 per gallon and Braun's solution is to give us back 17 cents. This is yet another 17-cent idea from a 17% approval rating governor. Talion went on to highlight that Governor Braun is using taxpayer money to pay for helicopter fuel to fly back and forth from his home.
And Senate Democrats made the same point, saying 17 cents wasn't a lot when you consider that gas is over $4 a gallon. In a statement, Senate Minority Leader Shelley Yoder said that this isn't a long-term plan. She said this is a patch. Braun, for his part, tried to pin the blame for rising gas prices on the Biden administration.
Okay, so back to the tax holiday. How long does this last and when does it start? Because we've gotten emails earlier this week saying, wait, I don't see that the prices come down.
Okay, so according to the governor, it starts immediately, though it takes some time to work through the state bureaucracy so that drivers might start seeing it. The governor said by early next week, possibly by the end of this week. As for how long it lasts, 30 days, Braun said it might be extended if needed. He said he wasn't making any guarantees on that, though. Right now, he said he would look at it at the end of the 30 days and see possibly if another extension is needed.
Okay, so 30 days. We did the math. This worked out to about $2 on the average tank of gas. But the governor said it'll, in total, save drivers about $50 million. Where does that money go?
So the gas tax goes to pay for Indiana's road work, a budget that INDOT has been warning us about for years. I asked Governor Braun if he was concerned about how the cuts would impact projects. He told me, quote, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
The gas tax wasn't the only energy cost move the governor made this week. He held a ceremonial signing for a law overhauling how our utilities are regulated.
Yeah, the governor says the law will tie any rate increases for utility bills to the performance of the utility company. He said that would make a big difference in affordability, but advocates told me Hoosiers won't see any immediate relief in their bills right away. Under House Enrolled Act 1002, signed by Governor Braun Monday, when it comes to requests for rate changes, utilities will be judged on affordability and reliability.
We're making sure the private sector forces of market competition and financial accountability are working to keep costs down for Hoosier families.
Right now, every time a utility company wants to change its rates, it files a request with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, which ultimately makes the decision. Starting July 1st, if a utility wants a rate change, it must file a rate plan that covers 3 years. Those requests for rate increases will be decided based on how customers' bills measure up against inflation and how quickly power is restored if it gets knocked out.
Generally, what we do like about it is it's sort of an acknowledgement that how we've been doing things isn't working. So we're going to try something different.
Kerwin Olson with the Citizens Action Coalition of Indiana says the CACI supported the new law. He called the penalties and incentives for utilities around performance metrics modest.
I think the governor is overstating the impacts a little bit.
Olson also questioned the impact of AI data centers on customers' bills. Governor Braun has said data centers coming in will have to shoulder a majority of the cost of setting up shop here.
That's not what we're seeing before the commission in some of these cases.
What Olson did applaud in the new law were some of its other provisions, like the requirement utilities establish low-income assistance programs, as well as new protections against shutting off power for non-payment when it's 95 degrees or higher outside.
It does prioritize low-income households, which we think is important.
Governor Braun said the new law considers both sides of the equation, both the consumer and utility companies, and if going forward the law needs tweaks, something added to it, that's what will happen.
And it's important to note that this is not happening in a vacuum. Hoosiers have been seeing some of the fastest growing utility bills in the country.
Right. 2 days after the governor signed that bill, the Citizens Action Coalition said Indiana now had the highest electricity bills in the Midwest. They cited a study by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and the Brattle Group.
And this isn't just restricted to Indiana. Our executive producer dug into the study and found that Americans making under $50,000 a year are spending more than 5% of their income just on electricity bills. And a lot of the increase is coming from the cost of materials. For example, the cost for power lines that cable electricity goes through is up more than 150% in the last 7 years. That's 5 times the rate of inflation. Finally, things aren't going to get better with data centers expected to demand another 90 gigawatts of power over the next 5 years. Now, that's a nationwide number, but it would be close to 4 times all of the electricity currently generated in the state of Indiana.
Right, and let's not forget another wrinkle in this comes back to the Iran conflict. About 40% of Indiana's power comes from natural gas. About a fifth of the world's liquid natural gas is currently held up by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Coming up next, early voting is underway in Indiana.
And so is retribution.
President Trump decided it's time for new leadership in the Indiana Senate.
Coming up, inside the push to punish Republicans who helped defeat redistricting.
And political violence targets an Indianapolis city county councilor.
Yeah, this was big news this week. What he's saying now about the attack on his home, as voters online show little sympathy.
They felt as if the personnel dismissed the screams because they thought the person was joking around.
Indiana Congressman Andre Carson goes inside the Indiana prison where ICE is holding detainees. What he found next on Crossroads Politics.
Welcome back to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. This week, Congressman Andre Carson toured the Miami Correctional Facility where ICE detainees have been housed since last October.
Right. The deaths of 2 detainees there in the past month and a half are under investigation. Congressman Carson said he and his staff spoke privately with 2 detainees who talked about the conditions inside, including what they believe contributed to the death of one of those detainees who they told Carson was screaming for help.
They felt as if the personnel dismissed the screams because they thought the person was joking around. And they re-emphasized that an intercom system would have possibly stopped their death.
That's just one account Congressman Andre Carson says he heard from ICE detainees after an hour-long tour of the Miami Correctional Facility Thursday morning. Carson says it wasn't clear which of the 2 men who died the detainees were talking about, but said inadequate communication with staff was just one of many concerns detainees expressed. Some of the others, inconsistent meal times, delays in access to legal counsel, and not receiving timely medical attention.
One of the detainees mentioned that they were very sick and it took 2 weeks to get proper medical care, and that proper medical care looked like a few Tylenol.
Carson was joined by clergy and religious faithful from around the state, many who come here every month to pray outside for the detainees inside and those working with them.
Let there be no misunderstanding. What is happening inside the walls of this prison behind us has been a moral and ethical catastrophe.
According to ICE, the first detainee who died in February was from Cambodia. The Miami County coroner says that man died from natural causes. ICE says the second man from Vietnam was found unresponsive in his cell last week. His death is under investigation.
Lorth Sim and Tuan Van Bowie. I say their names because ICE won't say their names.
Carson has called for a complete investigation into both men's deaths. ICE is required to provide a full report within 90 days. Carson told those gathered that a majority of ICE detainees don't have criminal records. According to ICE, both of the detainees who died here did.
Even if they did, having a criminal record doesn't automatically mean you deserve to die. Donald Trump should understand this.
Okay, now as we were taping this, I just got a statement from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security about those allegations from the detainees that talked to Carson yesterday. Here's what they said. Good morning. We are aware of detainee allegations regarding conditions at Miami Correctional Facility in Bunker Hill, Indiana, made during Congressman Andre Carson's visit Thursday, April 9th. We will research this and respond ASAP. Thank you, ICE Public Affairs.
Okay.
So that's the word from them. Congressman Carson was also asked about reports that ICE intends to set up a facility here in Indianapolis. He said he has asked but has not received a definitive or, in his words, satisfactory answer to that question.
It's important to point out we did hear from the Department of Homeland Security, which sent us a statement saying, in part, it is a long-standing practice to provide comprehensive medical care from the moment an alien enters ICE custody. This includes medical, dental, and mental health services as available, and access to medical appointments and 24-hour emergency care. Again, that coming from DHS. New information from the Deportation Data Project is shedding new light on the scale of the immigration crackdown.
Yeah, the project looked at all immigrant arrests by ICE in 2025, the first year of President Trump's second term. It found that arrests of immigrants with no criminal convictions have surged by 770%. Street arrests of immigrants were up more than 1,000% in that same time.
In response to questioning, a Department of Homeland Security spokesperson told NBC News that 70% of the arrests were, quote, criminal illegal aliens, but did not provide data to back that claim up.
And the immigration crackdown is also playing out in this year's primary election. Early voting is underway.
But one Indianapolis man who recently earned his citizenship ran into obstacles despite voting in the 2024 presidential election. Ella Rhodes spoke with his wife about their concern for others in the same position.
This is the letter Daniela Torres' husband received in the mail from the Marion County Election Board. It told him he must provide his proof of citizenship within 30 days so he could vote.
It's not like they're handing out citizenship to anybody. It is a hard process. So I don't think it's fair that we do all of this, and it takes years. And then all of a sudden, oh, you have to do it again.
Torres' husband earned his citizenship in 2023. He voted in the 2024 election with no issue. The letter didn't include a date or where to send his documents.
We don't have any problem with complying with what they're asking, but why make it hard? And especially, why didn't they communicate to other agencies? Because we had to go to 2 places.
With no luck at the BMV, they went to the Marion County Election Board.
We got it resolved, but we kept thinking about all those people that cannot take the time, have the car, the gas money, and everything to take care of it.
Marion County Clerk Kate Sweeney Bell feared this would happen after a new state law passed last summer, which cross-references data with the BMV for temporary credentials, which Torres had before 2023.
There is nothing else to call it but voter suppression. It is disenfranchising individuals.
Sweeney Bell says around 1,200 Marion County residents received the same letter.
This was a knee-jerk reaction piece of legislation to throw red meat to people who believe this false conspiracy theory that there was some form of voter fraud.
The Secretary of State's office told 13 News the one-time verification requirement is a safeguard for the U.S. citizenship voting requirement. But the Marion County Clerk shares the same concern as Torres.
Somebody might say, I'm not going to do it because I want to stay here in this country and I don't want to rock the boat. And that breaks my heart.
Torres has been so worried. He didn't want his name or face included in the story.
I'm here to stand up for him.
And everyone else in his position with the right to vote. In Indianapolis, Ella Rhodes, 13 News.
And Ella's here in studio now. This law is actually already seeing some legal challenges, right?
Exactly. So a lawsuit was filed in the fall with several organizations like the NAACP, the League of Women Voters, against this state code, saying it violates the 1964 Civil Rights Amendment. So Ella, what should people do if they receive a letter like the one Torres received? What do they do? Yeah, well, Clerk Kate Sweeney Bell, she says, if you're in Marion County, to immediately reach out to the clerk's office. They'll help direct you where you need to go. But as for people in other counties, they need to reach out to their county election board as soon as possible.
And when you spoke with Daniela, what was your sense of how they were feeling after all of this?
Yeah, well, Daniela had a lot of frustration just because her husband has been trying to get citizenship here for 25 years. It's a very long process. They've put a lot of money and time into it. So she just was like, it's another hoop for them to get through. But they're just happy they got it figured out, and they're concerned for others.
Yeah. And he got that citizenship and voted in 2024.
Yeah, with no issues.
No issues.
Okay, well, thanks for staying on top of this. Let us know as you continue. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ella. Appreciate it.
Well, with Election Day now a little more than 3 weeks away, the primary election, the campaign ads, they are flooding our phones, TVs, and mailboxes. I'm getting text messages like every day.
Me too, right? And President Trump is making good on his threat to retaliate against state lawmakers who voted against congressional redistricting here in Indiana.
You'll remember he and Vice President Vance pushed hard to get lawmakers here to redraw the congressional districts to try and pick up 2 more Republican seats in the House, but the Senate voted it down. Well, now the National Conservative Group Club for Growth is spending a record $1.5 million in 8 state Senate races here. In 7 of those races, they're targeting the incumbents. I talked with Club for Growth President and Hoosier native David McIntosh about it this week.
The Club for Growth is working with President Trump, Governor Braun, Senator Jim Banks, really on these Senate races to elect next generation conservatives who will help us keep the Republican Party strong. As you remember, there was a big vote about redistricting in the legislature late last year, and Senator Bray, the leader of the Republicans, opposed that. And several of these members that we're now challenging also voted no on redistricting. That means there are 2 fewer seats that can be Republican seats in the U.S. House. With a very slim margin, we need every seat to keep that majority next year or later this fall in the elections. So President Trump decided it's time for new leadership in the Indiana Senate. And to get that, we need to elect a lot of these new younger members who are running for Senate, challenging some of the old guard. And the Club for Growth is there to help them win their race.
Has Club for Growth ever put this much money into a primary election in Indiana?
This is the first time that we would have spent it on the state legislative races. We We were ready to spend more of that to help Jim Banks win his election, but it ended up being pretty much a clear field, and he was able to do that. We endorsed him, supported him, and worked with him. Way back in the past, we've been involved in some of the different primaries, but this is unique in that it's money being spent at the state level, really to correct the leadership so we can have everybody on the same page working as a team.
What about other states? Is there this much money being spent in other states as well?
Yes. In fact, in Texas, we've spent 2 or 3 times this much to help make sure that they passed their redistricting bill. And that gave us 5 Republican seats in the state of Texas. We've been working in states like Missouri, in Kansas, in Ohio, to really increase the number of potential seats, because the Democrats for decades have gerrymandered it. So like in California and Illinois and Boston, Massachusetts, there are almost no Republicans in those states, even when 45% of the voters there are Republicans. So it's time for the Republican Party to fight fire with fire, if you will, and redistrict in the red states so that we can make sure we can be competitive in the U.S. House elections.
How concerned are you about the midterm, given not just the razor-thin margin that was already there, but now given what's going on in Iran?
You know, I think the president's going to win the war there in Iran. And as he shared with the nation, do that quickly so that it's not a long, drawn-out affair. And I think that'll help. Right now, voters are concerned about it. They don't exactly know what's going to be happening. But I think when he shows that it was successful and he wins, that's going to be a plus for Republicans in the midterm.
All right, so pressure's on.
Yeah, the pressure's on. And we know right now, as we're taping this, the vice president, J.D. Vance, is in Pakistan right now trying to work on some long-term agreement to end this. So we'll see.
More to come.
Still ahead, political violence in Indianapolis.
Now my neighborhood is unsafe. My home is unsafe.
The home of an Indianapolis City County councilor riddled with bullets. Next on Crossroads Politics.
Welcome back. This week, shots were fired into the home of an Indianapolis City County councilor in an alleged act of political violence.
Councilor Ron Gibson shared these photos right here of the dozen bullet holes that were left in his front door. Monday's City County Council meeting started with prayer.
Yeah. Councilors tell Alex Alamanza violence is a growing reality facing those in public office.
For the first time since gunfire ripped through his home, Indianapolis Councilor Ron Gibson is speaking on camera for the first time, saying that he's grateful those bullets didn't hit him or his son.
Father, bring a spirit of care into this room. And let us look beyond tonight's agenda and remember the people behind every decision we make.
It was supposed to be a normal council meeting.
We pray with you. We pray for you.
For Councilor Gibson, it's probably the only normal part of what's been an abnormal day.
We've got to do a better job of not getting so upset that it leads to violence.
Gibson says about 15 gunshots were fired through his front door just before 1 a.m. The sound of shattering glass woke him up, but at first he says he thought nothing of it because it was so dark out. It wasn't until the sun came up when he noticed bullet holes.
I was shocked. I was scared. I was frightened. But I knew I couldn't scare my son, so I got him off to school before I called IMPD.
Amongst the shattered glass, this written note in a plastic bag that reads, "No data centers." A clear callback to last week's Metro Development vote that approved a data center in Gibson's district. Many residents are taking to social media to justify the shooting. Comments like, quote, "Actions have consequences, counselor." Others questioning the authenticity, like this comment, quote, "Sounds fake." Republican Minority Leader Brian Mowry calls the discourse, quote, "disgusting."
He has his young son that was asleep in the house at the time. To think that even anyone would fathom that he would be able to do that is a terrible thing to say. I don't understand where people come from with that.
As for Gibson's message to the shooter,
well, my faith calls me to forgive. I'm a Christian, so I must forgive. I would just ask him why. And my son was at home, so that says a lot about his humanity or her humanity. I don't know if it's a male or female. I don't know who it is, but I would just want to know why.
Councilor Ron Gibson says that he's never had cameras at his home, but after today, he's looking to get some installed. In Indianapolis, Alex Almanza, 13 News.
So far, there have been no arrests in connection with this shooting. IMPD and the FBI are investigating. Anyone with information is asked to call police. And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Emily Longnecker.
And I'm Dustin Grove. For all of us here at 13 News, thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.